Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
These shows are brought to you by the Compassionate Friends and the Open to Hope Foundation. Well, Heidi, we're going to be talking about high-profile losses today and how people cope with them, and we've got a couple of people on the show who really know a lot about how it is to have somebody die where everybody in the community understands and knows about it, and how you cope with it and what differences there are.
Well, Mom, I think this is a very timely show, and I want to dedicate the show to those people in Florida that lost their loved ones in the Florida shooting, school shooting recently. And this is very timely because, you know, like you said, these people lost it, and it's very high profile, and there was a lot of media attention, and I think these two bereaved moms today can talk to us about what it's like when for you it's a personal, private loss, but the world knows about it.
Absolutely. We're going to have two people on. Jamie Bright. Hi, Jamie.
Hello, Gloria.
It's good to have you on. And Delane Johnson.
Hello.
Hi, Delane. And tell us about them, Heidi.
Okay, let's see. Jamie Bright is a special ed teacher, and her daughter Danielle was murdered. She was a senior finance analyst at Weight Watchers, and she was in her late 20s at the time. And Delane Johnson is the past president of Bereaved Parents USA, and she is currently the vice president. I've been trying to have her on the show for quite a long time now. Her son Christopher was an Army captain killed in action in Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Yes.
So welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for coming on today. Well, let's start with you, Jamie. I know you were on TV and all sorts of things after your daughter was murdered.
Yes, I'm from Danville, Kentucky, and I've lived there all my life, and Danielle did too. And because I work in the school system, everyone knows me, and it just became just when, like you said, you want it to be private, but when this happened in New York City, and so then when the local affiliate in Lexington picked it up, they were at your door. And
I hear that people even hide in the bushes.
at Danielle's service, there was a photographer from the New York Post who was behind a tree.
Wow.
At the grave, at her resting place, yes. Yes.
And Delane, how about you?
Christopher was killed on Christmas Eve, 2003. And we're from small town, 5,600 people, 6,000, something like that. And he grew up there. I think the most difficult part of it was everybody knew, and the phone calls from the media. It was very early on in the war. And it was just, you do feel so exposed. There's no privacy. I remember just even a little bit of it because I was pretty out of it. But I remember my husband saying, he'd answer the phone and he'd go, "No, we're not doing interviews. No, you can't talk to her." And we had to put a stop to it. So
That's really hard. And you know, I worked with 9/11 families for 10 years in New York City. I worked with fire department families. And we went in 6 months after and started working with them. And the one thing that they said was, "Heidi, we really needed you there at the beginning because we needed to help you to help us field media and keep them at bay and take phone calls and help us navigate," like you said, people hiding and people calling and all that public stuff that you don't want when you're grieving a very private loss.
we had a casualty assistance officer who was amazing. And he fielded a lot of the intrusion
Oh, that's great.
and guided us because we had no idea what to do. And we had to wait a whole week before Chris came home. And so there was that longevity of, you know, waking up and not knowing who is going to be at your door again. You know, it was just very exposed.
Yeah. And Jamie, you ended up going to New York to a trial and going through that.
I had to make 2 trips. I had to go and identify her body. I begged her her boss at Weight Watchers to please do it for me. And he said he couldn't do it.
Had to be a family member, right?
Yes. And a trusted friend went with me. And that was the hardest thing I ever had to do, was to
Oh, I bet.
identify her body.
Yeah.
And she was a victim of domestic violence, and I can close my eyes now and I can still see how she looked. We could not have an open casket.
Wow.
She was just in such bad shape. And then 2 years later, my mother and I'm an only child. Danielle was an only child. The trial started, and we lived for 7 weeks in a hotel room, my mother and I.
Oh.
And so then we had to make a 3rd trip back to New York for the sentencing.
Now, did people want to interview you all the time this was going on, or was there any
Well,
intrusion? Or?
That's where the 48 Hours
the
came in.
television show.
We
Because
met,
this
we-
story was on 48 Hours, right?
They did
Yeah.
a story. They were there every day for the trial.
Wow.
And my mother, she's 83, and like a true Southern lady, but she did not want to talk to 48 Hours.
Yeah.
But the prosecuting attorney said, "You don't realize that this is like, it's beyond New York City. This is like in the world."
Right.
Wow.
And a family friend was on vacation in China, and he turned on the TV, and there was Danielle's picture. So he said, it's just basically out of your hands now.
Right.
And they can do that anyway, even if you don't want to
Yes.
cooperate. Wow,
Yes.
that's pretty incredible. Well, unlike this case, the military has quite a system of helping
They
people
really do.
and putting
And
them through.
Interesting though, with Chris's case, is that there was some things going on behind the scenes, and they kept information from us. So when we went down to the memorials, they kept an officer away from us. So that felt really deceiving. And it was really, really difficult for his fellow officers, people that worked with him in the TOC office, the Technical Operations Center. I wanted to meet them all. I felt
Of
like
course.
when we were on base, every bald-headed soldier was him. And I had to, I just
Well, we're all
couldn't believe.
dressed alike, so
They-
you can see you would even look
absolutely.
even more than, you know.
Absolutely. And I wanted to meet with all of the people that worked with him, anybody that had
Yeah.
a story,
Yeah.
anybody that
That knew him.
in a really personal way. And they counseled those soldiers before they met with us. So I really appreciated what you were saying on, you know, they didn't want us to know the extent. Christopher was unidentifiable. So I understand the closed casket. I understand all of that. I couldn't see him. So that part was probably the hardest part of any of it.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're all talking about traumatic loss in all these cases, which is really hard because you've got the trauma piece and the grief piece. And in our situation with my brother and cousin who died together in a car accident, the car hydroplaned and it blew up. And again, as you're both saying, it was very traumatic. And we had a closed casket as well for people. So it's very complex. And so how do we move through the trauma and come out, you know, and then through the grief and then come out on the other side to find hope and healing? You know, and I just designed a class at Columbia called Traumatic Loss During Childhood. and they've never had it before. And what I'm really going to talk to my grad students about is we need to deal with the trauma piece first and then move to the grief. And I am interested about how you both ended up finding hope. And I know with Delane, you've been very involved with bereaved parents for many years. You were the president, and now you're the vice president. And how did you find them, and how did that help with your journey?
I don't even recall how I found them, but I didn't find them until, I think, 2006. And then I started my own chapter in our town, and just one day, and I found so much healing in that group work and working with, hearing other people's stories. And it wasn't until years later that someone called me and wanted me to be on the board of directors. And I thought, okay, great, you know, I'll do that. So I served my first term, and then my second term came up. You know, I was voted in, and then voted president. And it's that work that is where I found that grief and joy can coexist, that you can find hope, and that you can learn to live and integrate that traumatic loss into your life. And that's where I am now. I'm a mental health therapist. I specialize in grief and loss. It's just so wonderful to be able to sit with someone, grieve with them, cry with them, and then show them how to live again.
I love that.
I love it too, Delane. And one thing I love, and my mom is a therapist, and I'm a therapist, and you're a therapist, is one of the things you also do is normalize the experience and not
Absolutely.
pathologize, because you've walked this walk and now you're a professional as well. So
I thought this might be a good time to show the clip.
Yes.
We've got bereaved parents. Do you want to introduce it?
yes, so we have a 1-minute clip of bereaved parents and kind of showing the hope and healing that takes place when we come together in community.
When I went to my first bereaved parent meeting, I found a room full of parents who also had been on this journey of grief. And today, I am living. I was given hope and tools so that I could survive.
There is a place you can turn to for comfort, for understanding, for support, and most of all, for hope.
Go ahead.
Okay, so that was a great clip,
Yeah, wonderful
And-
organization.
kind of showing how bereaved parents are together at a table, talking about their journey and talking about hope together and leaning on each other until they find their own hope. So.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Jamie, I want to talk to you a little bit about it because you talk about religion.
I do. I am a woman of faith. I'm the daughter of one of the most Christian women I've ever known. Danielle was also a Christian. I don't know how I could have got through the last 5 years. It'll be 6 on June 24th. Without my faith and the Compassionate Friends. One of my good friends came to Danielle's visitation and told me about the Compassionate Friends. And it's just been, unless you've walked in our shoes, you just don't get it. But even more than that, my faith. My favorite verse is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And one of the detectives in Danielle's case told me that 2 weeks before Danielle died, she told him that with Christ's help, I can change Jason. So just 2 weeks before her death, she was
She
talking.
thought she could do it.
She thought she could, and but my faith I cannot emphasize enough how it is just what keeps me going.
So you leaned on a power bigger than yourself
Yes,
to get through this.
yes.
And how about forgiveness? Because I know that's big on your.
Yes, we know that you said
Yes.
something about that.
Yes, I believe that Danielle is in heaven, and if I want to see her again, I had to forgive. I couldn't do it immediately. Took me 2 years, and it was at her sentencing that it's like God came to me and said, "You need to forgive Jason."
And you were at his sentencing.
Oh yes, my mother and I, we traveled back to New York again for his sentencing. And so I talked to my pastor at the time, and I said, that time has come. I'm ready to forgive Jason.
Wow.
And
powerful.
so I spoke at my church and gave my testimony. And
How many people were there?
over 300, it was Easter Sunday.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And so I sent a card to Jason.
And this is the man who murdered your daughter.
Yes, and I said that I forgive you. But having said that, I don't want to go to Clinton Correctional and visit him.
But he does send you a Christmas card. you
Yes.
said. And your husband said if you had sent him a forgiveness card, you wouldn't have to get that darn Christmas card.
He did, he did.
And I think it's important for people to realize that when forgiving doesn't mean forgiving the act. It doesn't mean
Exactly.
that you're okay with that. I love that you were able to do this because, you know, when we have hatred and keep thinking about revenge and all that, sometimes it can really wreak havoc on our health and be very difficult and create all sorts of problems.
Delaney, I wanted to ask you about it because your son was basically murdered.
Yes.
He was
Yes.
murdered, and it took me a long time because it's that covering that happens with killed in action, you know, and it took me a long time to realize that he was murdered at the hand of the enemy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it helped me or hurt me, but I really appreciated Jamie talking about faith because I was never angry at God. Not once. I was really angry at his people. And that took me a long time to get over that. And I witnessed that in my practice and working with other bereaved parents in BP USA, that they say they lose their faith. And they don't want to come back to it. And I've noticed that in my talking with them, I'm able to share that story and hopefully say something that will guide them back into that faith. Not necessarily a church,
Right.
but their faith.
Right.
Yeah, I remember saying to a bishop that we had on one of our shows, I said, I didn't find the theology particularly helpful, but the people were great. He said, well, what do you think the church is all about? It's the people.
I know. They excuse me, they were not there for me at all. They didn't, it was like the funeral was done, they didn't come around. I church hopped afterwards trying to find something to hang on to. And it wasn't until I stopped that searching so much as being able to just slow down and listen. And it was such a personal thing then after that. I went to lots of places and I've heard a lot of people, but you just have to find your own way in this. There's no other way to do it. It's not, you know, sitting at the feet of others. It's those hours, those at night, and you sit there and you have to work it all out. There's
And it
no
takes
other
time.
way. Oh,
Time
yeah.
is, you know.
And the other thing is, you made a good point when you said it was the hours at night, and that's one of the reasons we started Open to Hope, because we wanted to be an online presence 24/7. Because as you said, and as everybody here knows, sometimes our hardest grieving is at 2, 3, 4 in the morning when there's nobody around. And you're looking out the window saying, is there anybody else out there that can help me? I feel so isolated and alone. And I love the idea of being able to go onto the internet and hear stories like this and look at people that are further down the road for hope. I think it's really powerful.
So if you had some advice for somebody who has suffered a high-profile traumatic loss, what would it be, Jamie?
Well, just realize that they're there, so you might as well make the best of it. I am Facebook friends with, she's a senior executive producer now for 48 Hours, and she has become one of my friends, and just go with it, because I find that if you try to, you know, duck them or just be rude to them, that doesn't make anything any easier. Once again, my faith, just pray for physical and mental strength to get through each day. And you will find that you will have strength, that you can't understand where it comes from. I know that's what helped my mom and I those 7 weeks in New York. We had cards taped on the wall of our hotel room that we just knew people were praying for us. And my church community, my work family, just when I came back to school, everyone that first day I came back after the trial was wearing purple, and purple is the color of domestic violence.
Wow, that's
And
powerful.
that's why I'm, and I
You got your
find
purple
that
nails,
people,
lovely.
I love it.
purple, and I find it helps me when people comment on my nails. Oh, that's an interesting color. Well, it gives me a chance to tell Danielle's story.
And warn other people
And
about
warn.
domestic violence.
And because of the publicity I've had several friends and people who have found me on Facebook who ask questions about domestic violence, and I know the safe houses near my home. And if Danielle could, she never mentioned to me about what was going on with her. And if I could just unveil domestic, you know, the stigma of domestic violence, tell someone.
Awesome. Tell someone. That's
Yes.
great. Well, Delane, give us a little pitch for Bereaved Parents USA.
Oh, in August 4th through the 5th this year, we're going to have our gathering in near Memphis. The venue is Whispering Woods, just across the border in Tennessee. No, it's not Tennessee. Where is that? Olive Branch, Mississippi. You know, and I wanted to just say one thing, if I can.
Yes, please.
Is to make it matter. Because there's so many senseless things that happen.
Yeah.
You know, Danielle is senseless. I think Christopher's death is senseless. The 17 lives that were taken in Florida are senseless. They don't have meaning. People really strive to try to understand why, and I'm not sure that's the answer. But whatever happens to us, no matter how or what, is make it matter. Make it matter.
I like that. Make it matter. Well, fantastic. You guys are amazing, aren't they?
Absolutely, and you
Thank you.
both do make it matter. You're both building awareness in so many ways and reaching out to so many people to help them. So thank you.
So
You're
I'm
welcome.
hoping people that watch the show will see you and see what they can do
Yeah.
and make it matter. And also just the fact that you're surviving and thriving and that you have a life and that there's happiness in it.
And loving it.
And we'd ask you if you have any friends who have lost, please let them know about Open to Hope, and God bless.